Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bharti, and welcome to another episode of Dirk Swap Conversations on Open Source. And today we are going to talk about a topic which is close to our hearts, both of us, which is diversity, inclusion, and how open source actually enables it. It can become a kind of also a force that can encourage and drive other people also how to further encourage diversity and inclusion in their own environments. But I feel, Dirk, that it's not just that open source by design. Yes, it lowers the bar. You don't have to prove yourself. It doesn't really matter what your background is. You can just go in, start contributing. In most cases, all we see is people's email IDs. When I asked to Linus or anybody, they said, I don't know. All I see is, and sometimes people just make up my personal email ID is Arnie Swap because I'm inspired by Arnold Schwarzenegger. So Arnie Swap. Nobody knows a guy, boy, girl, where I'm from. So sometimes you don't know it. And I talked to, of course, Kelsey Hightower also, and he also said, that he ended up with open source because he did not have to prove himself who he was. He can just go in there and start contributing. It does create a lot of opportunity. There are, of course, some challenges, some struggle that we still have to face there, but still it is a very welcoming place. That said, it's people like you who do make extra effort. I'm aware of the efforts that you make to not only open doors for more people. So I have seen a lot of examples, and you gave also. I remember we were having a conversation when you talk about that. Whenever you go to these events and in the hallway track, you pick and choose with a person who doesn't look like you, and you would make an extra effort to go and talk to them. It does do a lot of things. We talked about it, but I want to hear from you. Why do you do that? We will talk about other things, but this is something I want to start with.
Yeah, so to me, this effort of trying to reach out to people who don't look like me is something that I started quite a while ago because I noticed, I think it was at one of the early KubeCons, I noticed that there was this group of people, all women, standing together, and next to them was this group of all white guys, and little further down the hallway was a group of like 8, 9 Indian people. And I was like, that's awkward because that's so, separate, segregated. And so I tried to join the group with the women, and they clearly didn't want to have me there. And I realized that, oh, there is a self-selection going on. And so once that self-selection has happened, don't interfere. But when people are standing by themselves, you can create a new group that is not homogeneous and therefore invites more other people in. And so I tried that at this event, and it worked fantastically. It worked really, really well. That by just being the starting point of a diverse group, other people join and other people feel that this is a group that is welcoming to anybody. And initially that was just kind of an experiment. I wanted to know if this worked. And it has become a habit of mine where I just try to create an opportunity for anybody to feel welcome to join a conversation. And to me, this is really, you gave a very positive view of open source and where you said that it's very welcoming and it's very open. But there is, of course, a dark side to that because plenty of evidence has shown that if you send an email with a patch submission, a pull request from a clearly female sounding email address, Susie at something, the responses that you get for fundamentally the same submission will be more critical, more negative if the email address sounds female. So there is unfortunately that other side that we still have a lot of people with prejudices, a lot of people who have a male bias or a bias towards people who are like them. And if your email address indicates being different, that adds to the risk of rejection. So I wouldn't try to present the open source community as so much better than everybody else. I would just say it offers you the opportunity to work around the challenges that from a societal perspective we still have.
I think we had this discussion in our previous discussion about toxic people. So when as you mentioned that if the name is female, so it also depends on what kind of people are responding to that, or it's a generic, the view also. So it's a mix, and you're absolutely right. That's why I said there are still a lot of problems within the open source world as well. It's not a bed of roses, but it does kind of create an opportunity. The kind of structure open source communities have is that it's not that legacy traditional model. Anybody can come in. Yeah, I mean, if you're no offense, but you can hide your identity and you can still be contributing. You don't have to physically, but just you are there. You're right about it, and I think a lot of communities are trying to solve that problem. There are a lot of communities like Gnome Foundation. They do a lot of work. Outreach program they have there. As I was talking last time also, that I was very impressed with some of the open source communities in Europe, like KD community, and although they are very open, very welcoming, very warm. You don't even talk about these things there. Either they have solved the problem there, or that is not a big issue there because of where they are situated. They have access to Asia, Africa, so a lot of people come back and forth. So there is not one factor. There are a lot of factors, but it boils down to, I think, people, right? You and I are the one who make that comment. Or and right now in the political world also, the whole argument, or whether she should use the term doctor with her or not. And so yes, there are problems everywhere. But I think we touched upon that earlier, and I am not going to put you in a spot, but still, why should we care about diversity? Like, if three people had their own groups, like females have their own group, white males have their own group, Indians have their, as long as they are productive within their own group, that's fine. Why diversity?
Diversity is the direct shortcut to having a broader set of ideas being considered. And there are plenty of studies that show that if you have 10 incredibly bright people who come from a similar background, went to the same school, have this similar life experience, that if you have those people try to jointly solve a problem, their overall quality of solution will be no better than any individual of them. But if you have 10 incredibly diverse people, and hey, even people who are less bright, less educated in a completely different field, and you have them try to jointly come up with a solution of a problem, then the solution they will come up with is better than the best solution of any of the individuals. So the idea of bringing different patterns of thought, different backgrounds, different histories, different experiences, different education into a conversation is really important for projects. There are the classic examples of the soap dispenser that only reacts to white skin, of the facial recognition software that generally does far worse with brown skinned people, of the fact that most clinical trials are biased towards a better educated white people. So if you look at some of the challenges with the COVID vaccination data that the AstraZeneca vaccine has run into, it's the fact that the trial participants were not a reflection of the population that the vaccine is going to be used in. So it's the same pattern over and over again. If you only look at people who look like you are massively restricting your ability to gain additional knowledge, to find better solutions to your problems. And harmless things like hallway conversations, if, for example, all the white guys only talk to each other, they won't even become aware of the challenges that people who aren't like them have in that community, because all they hear from are people who don't have those challenges. So mixing it up and talking to people who are different from you, and oh, by the way, who disagree with you, is really a key part of gaining knowledge, of making progress. So if you look at one of the challenges that we see in parts of our political and societal system where people prefer to surround themselves with others who agree with them instead of surrounding themselves with people who challenge them. You can see the different outcomes of that. And you can see that the willingness to have people disagree with you and the willingness to invite other points of view that maybe aren't leading to the outcome that you initially wanted will likely still lead you to a better outcome. Now, if we bring this back to open source, one of the premises of open source is where you started, that anybody can contribute. And that's great. But that requires that in all environments, whether it's back in the pre-COVID day, an in-person conference, or an email discussion or a GitHub pull request, that every voice is heard and that you give everyone the opportunity to participate and to help shape the result, and not just a small clique of people who have already firmly set beliefs into their way of doing things.
As good as it sounds, I cover diversity a lot, and every time I post, I remember I posted a video, Guido, I think that's how he says his name. And initially everything was good, but the moment people start watching, when he started talking about the efforts he makes for diversity, he said, I only mentor either female or people of color. I do not mentor any white guys. So people were like really, really upset with the whole story. And they started giving example like, no, you don't need diversity. Look at a company like Apple, they are serving the whole world, and they don't have, if you look at their core team, it's all pure white. And then sometimes they also post, once again, we are talking about the toxic people, a lot of negative comments, but there are still a lot of people who still maintain, hey, look at around it. These are the XYZ companies. They are not diverse, but they are doing just fine. We don't need it. But the reality, as you mentioned, when we do bring people from different backgrounds, I mean, the way I look at problem, and I think we discussed this earlier also, diversity does not just mean female and people of color. It means a lot of different things. The way an Italian thinks, even if the skin tone is same, is totally different than German. You would not want, efficiency versus laid back attitude versus. So same thing in India also, different parts of Indians, they think differently. When you bring all those people together, you're bringing a diverse set of mindset towards looking at things, looking at problems, solving problems. So it's deeper than skin color. It's deeper than language. You are just bringing different experiences into the same room. That is the idea, not just that. One more thing, this may be totally unrelated, but I always think about it that when we look at nature, when we look at a very healthy ecosystem, we always see a very diverse ecosystem. We do not see an ecosystem which has only one kind of plants. That ecosystem, first of all, that is not an ecosystem. It will die off. We always need any healthy ecosystem on the world, in this planet, is diverse, all the way from rainforest to African safaris. So, I mean, nature itself tells us diversity is the only way for survival and sustainability.
You're absolutely right. Monocultures tend to create tons of problems, and then more chemicals are used and more problems occur. And another example, as you know, I'm an avid diver. I love sharks. And we see that whenever, for well-intentioned reasons, an element of a diverse ecosystem is removed. So if people start culling sharks, it puts the whole ecosystem into imbalance, and it destroys the functioning of this very complex system. But I want to go back to your previous comment, which I thought was very interesting, that diversity is a lot more than women and men or white and not white. And I actually pre-recorded a session for a conference in India, a Python conference in India, about neurodiversity, where I was part of a panel talking about the issues that neurodiverse people face in the hiring process, in the corporate world, and what companies can do to be more welcoming to a neurodiverse set of employees. And to me, this is just one of the many aspects that we constantly need to look out for to ensure that who we are as a community or as a company matches who's around us. And whenever you have this group of people saying, oh, but all white guys together can create fantastic software. Yes, they can, but does this software necessarily solve the problems of everyone in that audience? Does the software actually feel intuitive and useful to people who are different from that group? So to me, the arguments against diversity are getting really stale and stupid. And very often when you pay attention to who is spouting these arguments, you will see a certain mindset in these people that kind of explains why they follow these beliefs. To me, the underlying logic for diversity, I think, is a settled fact. What becomes challenging is to find ways to increase the diversity in the environments that you're in. And one of the challenges that I constantly battle with is that I would love to talk more about this, but then I would be a middle-aged, straight, white guy talking about diversity, and that's I'm the incarnation of not diverse in this industry. So I actually quite frequently turn down invitations to speak or to be part of a video or whatever, because I say, no, bring someone who doesn't look like me. And sure, I mean, if you don't find anybody, I'll be happy to be part of this conversation, but make sure that you find people who actually reflect your audience. And then, of course, you get to the other extreme. We had an introduction of a new organization in the office of the CTO last week, and the org chart of that organization was, as it's done these days, all little pictures. And so they showed this org chart of this group, and a comment on the Zoom channel was, "Oh, that's not a very diverse team." And of course, the irony is there was an almost all-female team. And yes, that's also not diverse. And that's also the other extreme. If you have a team that is all Black women, that's not diverse. It's great for your overall company diversity numbers, but from a individual team perspective, it's not anti-white guy to want to have diversity. It's about truly creating communities where the people within are different from each other. And to bring it all back to the beginning of this conversation, where you talked about the fact that open source with a more email or GitHub username, or with a interaction model that initially, at least, is all about an identifier that does not necessarily bring back to your identity as a person, does not immediately reflect who you are from an easily accessible perspective. I think that's a good thing. I think that is part of what can help to be more open and more inviting to people who are other, who are different.
You made a lot of great point there. It's just it's an anecdote. I don't want to name anybody. I will not even share the name. But there was somebody I was going to meet for an interview from a foundation, and the name sounded, whatever. So we start chatting. We are in a city. I said, yeah, so we can meet for an interview. I'll do an interview, and you're like, okay, we can hang out after that because it will be late night, and then maybe we can go for beer and blah blah blah. We were just talking like that, and then okay, I got a message that, oh, I am in the lobby. So I went to the lobby and I was looking for the person. I could not find the person, and I was like, what's going on there? So I said, I cannot see. And then the message I got, I'm just at the lobby next to the, and I look at it. It was a girl. So the kind of conversation I was having, that we can go out and hang out after that, I was just assuming that it's going to be guys. So I was just like that. But even after that, we had a blast, we had and she introduced me to, I never drank margarita. And then, it became a good friendship also. But I was not expecting that I was by design, because there was no identifier like that. So I assumed that is a guy. So, but, in the end, it doesn't matter. But that also happens. Things would have been different if I knew already that it's a girl, that I would have talked like, hey, we can just hang out for a beer, blah, blah. Maybe not, but it did not matter. So sometimes it can have positive or negative, Once it removes that identifier, you just talk to that person like a person, instead of thinking, hey, it's a black, white. So it has pros and cons. Now, when you're talking about diversity, like I think it was France, Paris was fined because they hired way too many female for the city. I heard the news, I think yesterday. The French city was fine because they hired way too many female there. Because in US or in Europe we can talk about it because we do talk about diversity, because of the racial history. There is a big topic. But when you go to a country like India, there are 2 billion people who have brown skin. They do have their own challenges, because I grew up in India. South Indians versus North Indian, East Indian, India from East India are looked down. So they themselves have a lot of challenges. But yes, diversity is just not about having one more person of color. If you have everybody who is a person, that is also not a diverse group. If it's all Indians, that's not diverse. So diversity is not just a problem of white males to think about. It's for everybody. So the idea is that different experiences, it doesn't have to be necessarily skin color. It is much more that. But that becomes the very big factor. Now, we talked about the problem. You also mentioned open source initially, and you also said that sometimes you turn down the offers. You say that, hey, just bring someone else there. But in most cases, you are leader not only of a community, but within a company as well. You do have a team that you have to manage. And that team may happen to be a diverse team. Now, if you do have...
It's very diverse.
Yeah. If you do have a diverse team, first of all, you need to be able to empathize with them so that you can understand how to make them comfortable, So you have to put yourself in their shoes, which is not an easy task, It's not that you will just suddenly travel to India for 10 years like Steve Jobs to think how India is. So what my question to you is, all these leaders, whether they are of open source communities or they are heading department in the company, how should they be able to empathize with their team members? So that, because sometimes we make remarks, we approach things, sometimes we overdo it. Like everybody in India like spicy curry, which may not be the fact. Jokes apart, the serious question is, how should leaders empathize with their teams?
Well, I think it starts with two often quoted statements that, once you think them through, make a lot more sense. Be comfortable with being uncomfortable, and be comfortable with asking questions and with appearing wrong. So very often, as we interact with others, as we interact with teams, as we interact with people who aren't like us, we are very worried about sounding knowledgeable, sounding like we understand, sounding like we know what we should be saying. And one of the really important things that I've learned is that that you have to allow yourself to put yourself in a position where you are uncomfortable with your lack of knowledge, and where you're uncomfortable with the questions that you ask because they expose how little you know. So I force myself to go into situations where I don't know what is the right thing to say. And I say, I don't know what the right thing to say is. Help me help you. Help me understand how I can be a better ally, a better supporter, a better sponsor for you. So often this is thought of as reverse mentoring. I think of it as part of everyday interactions, where you really need to allow yourself to expose your lack of knowledge, to expose your lack of understanding of a different culture. I've been to India. I would never assume that I have even the slightest understanding of the finer nuances in Indian culture and in the differences between the parts of the country and the racial makeup of the people and whatnot. And so when I'm in a situation where that is required knowledge, instead of pretending that I know things, I will say, well, I actually don't know. Who can help me understand? And that openness to being wrong, that invitation to get information, is something that really helps you learn, and through that helps you lead. And I typically say the one thing I'm really good at is being wrong.
The one thing that I love when you said that it's okay to be uncomfortable. There is nothing wrong, to be uncomfortable. Because when you are uncomfortable, then I have realized in my life, fear is good. Fear, prepares you, because when you're comfortable, you sometimes become arrogant also, because, I can handle the situation, I know everything. as a leader, yes, you may hone all these skills, you may learn how to deal with it, but you have team members who work with each other. How to trickle it down to your team members so that they also kind of have the same approach towards their colleagues, their team members, because a team is a unit, and that, okay, a leader can be a great leader, but if every member of that unit, and that unit also involves that person of color, that diverse person, it could be a female, or you want to feel comfortable, as you said, females, they wanted to make their own group, so it is not just about white males, it is also about making that person of color comfortable, and so that they also have the same approach, because in their own country, they are majority, they are not minority.
So there are all these classes: the leader's voice, executive presence, how to project confidence. And I look at them and I understand where the notion comes from, that the leader needs to lead with authority and with comfortable confidence and all that, and give a clear message and clear direction. I get all that. But what I don't agree with is that vision that it is not acceptable for a leader to show the things that they don't know, because that immediately reduces the willingness of people to criticize you, the willingness of people to give you information that you possibly disagree with, that creates an environment where you are not open to learning more. And the one thing we all need to do is we need to learn more. So now, in the spirit of this, earlier when you told the story about your interview and then afterwards going out for beer, you referred to the person that you were talking to as a girl, which a lot of people would find offensive, because if it had been a male person, you would have said a man, not a boy. So why are you saying a girl and not a woman? So being open to being challenged on your choice of words and on the implications that those deliver for either how you think about a situation or how your audience perceives how you think about a situation, is one of those key challenges as we grow, as we develop our own sense of how do we talk about topics. And so I mentioned that I was part of a panel about neurodiversity. And I noticed in that panel, as I'm talking about a topic that I speak a lot about and that I'm very engaged in, that I still was stumbling over my words, trying to find a good way to phrase a description of a group of people or of a certain behavior that did not immediately include a language that could be seen as derogative or negative or prejudiced. And so it's really interesting to observe in yourself how your own perception of what words mean and how you should describe situations constantly changes. And things, if I see statements from myself from 5 years ago, I very often end up cringing, because my perception of what is the right way to describe people, to describe situation, to describe conflicts has changed dramatically over the past decade.
Uh, yeah. I mean, you made a very interesting point about girl versus, but I think I said if it was not a guy, it was a girl. I think that's because yes, you're right. We do use those kind of terms, because here is your subconscious worry that you might think that that person may not like to be called a woman. Oh, I'm still, don't call me mom. I'm still. So because okay, so one of the reasons why I said so is that I'm also friends with a lot of friends of my wife. So when they call each other go girl, but they don't call it go mom, go woman, they treat each other like go girl, go do this. So I like, yeah, maybe that is appropriate, so we learn, right? I'm a male, I don't know how to say, so I learn. But one thing more is that these things, we have talked about this earlier, whether you are using it as you are talking about when you're in a group, we do a lot of things. Sometimes we use the word hey guys, maybe we should use folks, a gender neutral term. But to train ourselves so that these kind of, the way we talk, the way we interact become part of who we are, not, hey, you know what, I'm wearing my corporate hat, so I'm going to office, so I'll be very, very. Should this also be something we follow at home? Like when I talk to my sons, sometimes they'll say, hey guys, I said, maybe you can say folks, sometimes my 3 days ago, my son was saying, boys should not marry boys. I said, no, boys can marry boys, girls can marry girls. You can marry whoever you want. There's nothing to with boys and girls. My point is that should we like have two different, like personalities? This is corporate personality where I will use these terms carefully versus making it part of your habit, lifestyle, your culture itself. So you don't have to make an effort, because that's, I think, will percolate through your kids, your friends, your colleagues. So you will have an impact socially, not just 9 to 5.
So if it is better not to use offensive language, negative language at work, why would it be a good idea to use that language at home? I'm not sure. I have 2 daughters, which of course changes the dynamic at home anyway. But I think it is reasonable that we use different type of language, different boundaries in different environments. I think that's perfectly normal. But some of the language that used to be acceptable and then today is not acceptable anymore should be not acceptable everywhere. Whether you are hanging out with a group of people who are exactly like you, whom you've known for decades, or whether you're in a diverse work environment or at the supermarket, it doesn't matter. You should always have some restraint in how you express yourself. And of course, in this day and age where everyone has a cell phone and you can become a Twitter video star in no time by saying something incredibly stupid or acting like a complete moron, maybe it's a good thing that we restrain ourselves a little more. I don't know. To me, this is, we are talking about diversity in open source projects, right? But the underlying thought processes, the changes that I think we all need to make in the way we act, we speak, we interact with each other, they far transcend just open source projects. They are about our society, about the world that we live in, and the world that we want to live in. And I want to live in a world where a gay, trans, Black woman is as safe as a straight white guy. And so to me, consistently reflecting on these values and consistently representing these values, yes, it affects my open source work, but it affects everything that I do in my life. And every time I fail against these values, I perceive that as failure. And it's not, oh, only if I fail at work is it a problem. Otherwise, it's fine.
The reason I ask you is that one of the reasons we are having this discussion or any other discussion is that these communities, these companies, microcosm of our world. The reason we have this problem is because this is a problem of our society. It's not that, suddenly open source or corporate world has a problem. No, in real world also, like with girls, oh, don't climb on the monkey bar. That's for boys. Boys are, they can take risks, they can do things. So if you look at the early days, all the video games, they have pictures of boys, games are for boys, dolls for girls. So the reason we are having this discussion today about the problem of diversity in the tech or any world is because this is a problem for society. So we cannot solve that problem within the tech world, but leave it open in the society. So if we make the changes overall, we will not even have to talk about it. So when I said that there should be no kind of boundary between a personal life versus, because if we teach our kids, they will not have to deal with this problem in the workplace because this is the norm. Diverse people is the norm in the world that we live in. I remember Brian Benendorf. I love him. I adore him. I grew a ponytail because of him at one point. And he said that your open source community will not survive and sustain if it doesn't look like the world that we live in today.
My story to this is in grade school, my daughters were asked to pick an instrument for band. And a good friend of the family is a Juilliard trained tuba player. And he also actually has twin daughters, just like I do. And so one of my daughters says she wants to play the tuba. And the insert expletive band teacher says, oh, well, no, only boys play the tuba. And my wife and I were like, excuse us? Yeah, no, that's not your answer, is it? Oh, needless to say, my daughter, of course, plays the tuba, and she plays in the Metropolitan Youth Symphony, and she does very well. Thank you very much. But to me, the idea that in the year 2000, of what was it, 15, 14, a teacher would tell a girl that only boys do that. I was flabbergasted. How can you do that? That is just ridiculous. And so, yes, it is all about how we raise our children, how we act in the society, how we create a society for our children that is better than the one that we found from our parents.
Dirk, once again, thank you. I should say that, one of the reasons I mean, I will not give you 100% credit, but one of the major reasons that I started talking about diversity more was that conversation that we had at the spot when you mentioned, you go out and reach out to people. Because the fact is that every conversation that we have in our life, whether we realize or not, they change us, they teach us something, they change our outlook. So it's very important to not only have this conversation, but have this conversation with people who don't look like you, because there is so much we can learn from each other. It's beyond our imagination. So first of all, thank you for teaching me that valuable lesson, that the effort make. And second is, thank you for this discussion today. And I am looking forward to talk to you again soon. So once again, thank you for so many things.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I look forward to the next one.